Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to thank and pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Hi everyone, and welcome to Room by Room, the Home Organisation Science Insights podcast, produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. We are champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element, with expert knowledge from professionals in the field. I'm your host, Gabriella Joustra, coming to you from Naarm, Melbourne, Australia. Let's get started. Hi everyone, and welcome back to the show. I'm joined by Shivani, interior designer and home improvement expert. Today we're going to be talking about remodeling on a budget. Hi, welcome.
Hi, Gabriella. Thank you so much for having me. My name's Shivani, as you mentioned, and I'm a designer and home design writer and expert, and I live in Macon, Georgia.
Great. We're going to do a little bit of an introduction to you. It's called Have You Met Shivani? We're just going to ask a few questions to get to know you better. Great. What's a movie you've watched recently?
So I am Indian. I love Bollywood movies. And so a recent movie that I watched was Lal Singh Chadda, which is a Bollywood adaptation of Forrest Gump, and loved it. Me and my husband watched it, and it was a really good movie.
I never thought of, other adaptations of Forrest Gump. What are the differences?
You know, me either. We were both very surprised when we saw it on Netflix. We're like, oh my gosh, like there's an Indian adaptation of Forrest Gump. Really, probably the main differences are language, and it definitely had an Indian twist to it. So,
and would you recommend it for everyone?
I know that some people love to watch Bollywood movies and some don't, but I recommend it with subtitles. I think anyone could find it funny and just an interesting adaptation of the classic.
That sounds great. I think I'm going to watch that.
Yeah, for sure. Let me know what you think when you watch it.
Definitely. Do you have a role model?
Yes. So I actually met him this year, and I was so excited. Mark D. Sykes. He's a very well-known interior designer here in the U.S. One of the reasons why I find him so inspiring was, I'm just like him. He was a career changer. So he had a degree in finance and economics. He went from the world of visual merchandising, and then he moved to California and started designing his own home. He had done his own landscaping, I think, from what I know of his story. And a landscape designer found, his work and submitted it to House Beautiful. And from there, his career grew. So it's really nice to hear people who aren't traditionally trained and still, entering the world of interior design. And I think one of his most recent projects was he is now the interior designer for the White House, which is awesome. And he was really nice when I met him, very sweet. I asked him for advice. I was definitely very nervous, but I got him to sign my book, and it was just a cool experience.
So it's not true that you shouldn't meet your heroes.
No, for sure. I've actually not heard of that before.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Yeah, I heard don't meet your heroes because they won't be as good as you think they'll be.
Oh, really? I've not heard of that. Oh my gosh. No, he was fantastic. He's so sweet and so down to earth, and just someone that you'd want to chat with and hang out with.
That's great. And I'm glad you had such a great experience and such a great role model as well. So applicable.
For sure. Totally could relate to him, and it was nice.
And have you completed any courses recently?
Yes. So I am kind of a business nerd. I'm always taking business courses. Being an entrepreneur, it's like learning anytime I can, ingest some type of information that will help me grow is always beneficial. But I'm also enrolled in the Rhode Island School of Design. They have an online residential interior design certification program. And so I'm a few months into that. I think I have about a year and a half left. So I'm doing that part-time and I love it. It's a great school. I'm learning a lot and it's very supplemental to, what I'm doing now. So
I have found the best way to learn anything is to learn it and then be able to like directly apply it to what you're doing already.
Yes, I agree with you for sure.
And it's so fun to be like, oh, I learned that last week. Okay, I'm going to use it now.
Right, because it's like, it's just fresh in your mind, so.
So how would you define home organization?
When I think about home organization, to me, it's just bringing peace into your life, whether it's anything really in your environment, that's you're just decluttering, you're letting go of things that no longer serve your greater good. That's how I define it.
That's really lovely. I've heard a lot of definitions and I think bringing peace, that's the nicest one I've heard so far.
Oh yeah, that's good. That's definitely what it does for me. And I know that people who practice organization, that, they say the same thing. It just brings some peace.
Are there any misconceptions about home organization?
I'd say probably number one is it's expensive. It doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be this super, elaborate project where you need to buy certain items from certain stores or designer brands or anything like that. And the second misconception is that it's for, type A personalities or people, people who are just very strict. I think that's a big misconception too. I think anyone on any budget, any personality can benefit from an organized home.
Definitely. That's, I guess everyone needs to find where they've put everything.
Exactly, right? Like it could be so small as like, are you a person who just can't find their keys? Well, home organization could, benefit you. So,
So, what is remodeling with your house?
So remodeling, I know sometimes people get the terms confused. Remodeling and renovation are two different terms in the industry from what I know. And renovation, it really just means you're restoring something, right? It could be you're restoring it back to a previous state or into good condition. It could be you're refreshing something, reviving something. And then remodeling is you're creating something new. There's something structurally is changing. So you're remaking something and it's a new process.
Interesting. I think I've always used the word renovating for both of those. So it's good to know, I guess, that, now I can tell people and they'll actually know what I'm talking about specifically.
Yeah, for sure.
And so how is remodeling different, I guess, on a budget versus not on a budget?
The only thing that really comes to mind for me is it limits your options, right? Remodeling versus remodeling on a budget, it just limits your options. It might also mean that you're increasing the amount of tasks that you put on yourself versus things that you can outsource. And then number three, probably the biggest thing is it might decrease the amount of changes or updates you can take on. So you might go in full-fledged, like, I want to do my whole first floor. And then when costs start coming in, you're budgeting, it's time to think about what's a high priority versus what's a low priority.
So I guess, how do you begin the process of budgeting?
So for me, when I tell my clients and for myself, I just became a homeowner first time, and both professionally and personally, I would say you need to think about a budget that works for you, right? How much can you realistically spend on a home improvement project? But then you also need to add 20 to 30% of what's called a contingency budget. And what that means is, stuff happens. Anyone will tell you, whether they're a contractor, electrician, a designer, unexpected things happen. It's just, it's just the nature of the beast, I guess. I don't know how else to say it, but having that 30% is important.
Has anyone ever, in your experience, not used that extra 30%? Does everyone always use that? Yeah.
Probably. Most often not, because unexpected things happen. And if there is a time where there's a little bit of a leftover fund, it's always nice to add in something that maybe you couldn't initially before. So
I guess it's contingency / the extra bit that you wanted.
Exactly. It could work either way. But most oftentimes in my experience, something always ends up being more expensive than you had initially had thought.
Okay. And how does remodeling change the environment of the home?
Probably the biggest, 5 things I could think about are, it beautifies your spaces, right? It refreshes them. It brings you more joy as well, and it could also just be functionality, right? So having spaces that function in a certain way that they weren't functioning for you before.
So what's some examples of the functionality?
So the 3 major ones that come to mind for me would be, what if there's a space that you want to extend? So maybe you have a dining room and a kitchen, and they're both really small. So maybe you're opening up that wall structurally, and then you're creating a brand new kitchen that extends to these 2 new spaces. So extension of a space. Functionality could also mean storage. Functionality could mean creating a purpose in a space that otherwise didn't exist. So I had a client once, she had an unfinished basement and she remodeled the entire basement. It was almost like a mini house. I think it was like 2,000 square feet down there. And it was because she had grandkids and her children, and she wanted something, that functioned for them, that provided this safe place. Even though they were home visiting their parents, it was just like their own little niche,
Kind of like a granny flat, except the opposite.
Exactly. Right. Like the granny's providing the flat and it's for the kids.
And it's like underground.
And it's underground, right? Exactly. But it was super pretty. It didn't feel like dingy or anything. It had plenty of windows and stuff. So
yeah, so long as you do it right, I don't think it'll be dingy.
Exactly, right.
So I guess, what are some issues that people come across?
Oh gosh, there's quite a few that can happen. But I would say probably the biggest challenges when you're remodeling or renovating is understanding what the costs will be, planning for that cost, budgeting out an appropriate budget. Number 2, it's so important to find tradespeople that you trust. Whether that means, getting someone vetted that has worked with your direct family member or colleague or friend, or reading reviews, making sure they're licensed, those little things, but really finding the right person for the project, not only from, I will say, not only from an experience standpoint, but from, you want to be around someone you like to work with, right? Like if you have a painter who does an amazing job, but he's kind of like a jerk, or he's not pleasant to be around, that changes things. These are people who, when you're remodeling or renovating, you're having people in your home, right? In your personal space. And so it's really important to pick the right people, I would say, number 2. And then another big challenge that I feel like can happen is understanding the order of things. So I'll give you an example. If you're changing out your countertop, your new sink, if you are getting a new sink, it needs to be on site for your fabricator to be able to come up with that template for your countertop. So just understanding okay, so if I have this window, what do I need to get done before the electrician comes? What do I need to get done before the plumber comes? And, just understanding the order of things.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about, the order of things. I guess, do you have to go backwards to forwards, or you just,
it's a good question. I mean, it's a valid question. It just depends on what you're doing and what type of project it is.
So I guess the most important things are research, research your builder, research your materials, and research what order you have to do everything.
Yes, it's super helpful to know that for sure.
Mm-hmm. So why do people go through this, I guess? Why do people remodel their houses?
So for sure, beautifying the spaces, huge priority. Second is to improve the functionality like we talked about. Three, sometimes it could be for a life change, right? Like a big life event. Maybe you're having kids, your family's growing, you need more space, but you can't move. I have a client now who, their kids they've stayed in this home, they've been raised in this home, so they don't want to create any disruption until they reach a certain point in school. So they have chosen to stay but remodel. So it could really vary, but sometimes, honestly, it's I would say it's a big psychological component. If you think about just everything that's happened globally in the past few years, we're staying home more, right? And so creating this oasis, creating a space that makes you feel good, whether you're working from home or however you're spending your time, there's a huge benefit. I mean, there's a huge psychological benefit where if you can work and play and live in spaces that make you feel good, there's a lot of value in that.
Have more people been trying to remodel their houses in the last few years?
Yes, I do think the statistics show that, and I read a lot of house updates, and there are statistics that show there has been an increase, especially with people staying home more. I just don't know what those exact statistics are because it's been a while since I've read them, but I know that I think it's about 28% people now are focusing on their kitchens. Like that's a huge one of the, probably I think the number one remodel people do, and then second being bathrooms.
And so are those sort of, was it less? Do people remodel their kitchens and bathrooms less prior? Has there been a change in what people have been doing?
That's a good question. I don't know specifically the changes in which spaces. I do know that kitchens and baths usually top remodeling projects. But I'm curious too. I want to go after we have this chat, I'm going to go read some statistics because I am curious.
Yeah, I think I could make up some theories as to why. Bread for kitchens.
Right.
And then I would think, I don't know, like hobby rooms would be the next one. I don't know. That's my making things up.
Yeah, hobby rooms, I don't know much about that. I know sometimes from what I know, it can not always benefit resale value. And that I will tell you, I wrote a piece for The Spruce earlier this year, and I had interviewed real estate agents, and hobby rooms can sometimes actually detract buyers. So that's also important to know too. If, what's your location? Are you even thinking about resale value? And then over customizing can sometimes lead to an issue too if you're trying to, resell your home.
So why would hobby rooms detract buyers?
So for example, if you really over customize like a craft room, right? And then the next buyer isn't a crafter. That's essentially a space that they're not being able to see the potential in. They're just seeing like, okay, well, I'm going to have to change this now. So those are some things like if you over customize, that might create an issue because sometimes with resale value, you want to appeal to the masses, right? You want something like a blank canvas where the new homeowners can imagine the potential of this space. So, but you never know. You might just find a crafter and they're like, oh, this is what I've been looking for. So it could go either way.
We should start a real estate agency just selling for people with really specific hobbies.
Yeah, that would actually be very cool.
I don't know if that would work. Not enough people. I do have a question about remodeling to sell versus to live in it.
Okay.
How important is it, to evaluate the resale value versus sort of just your livability in the house?
Well, that's a great question. I would say that a lot of times are interchangeable, right? Because anything that improves your livability will most likely improve the next person's, unless you over customize. But kind of going back to improving the kitchen, right? Or improving a bathroom, that's something that everyone can benefit from. So that's might be a tough question, but that's how I feel about that one.
So there's no real differences between, I guess, the two of them, the two reasons to remodel.
Well, no, there could be differences, because what if I guess livability is such a broad term, right? You know, every person's so unique and we all have different needs. And so maybe one thing that you do in your home or one upgrade you make wouldn't make sense to the next person. So it's hard to make every decision based on what would sell well. Of course, this is your home, you know, and you want to make it work for you. But if you're in the market, you know, I tell clients, you know, if you're in the market to sell your home within the next couple years, you know, it's best to do something that will benefit you long term versus like a short term upgrade. So like, you know, kitchens, for example, like if your sink is not doing well, that's a great investment. A pot fillers are becoming more streamlined, you know, so things like that as well.
What's a pot filler?
Oh, so the pot filler, it's right above your stovetop, and it pours water to the sink, essentially. Yeah.
I didn't know.
One trip.
I've seen them in restaurants. I didn't realize that was a thing you could have at home.
Yes, I just installed one in my home, and one of my clients, we are installing one for her too. So it looks really pretty too. It's functional, but it's pretty too.
I think it's so good because, yeah, often I have to, you know, take the pot, it's really heavy, over to the sink and then fill it up. That's very annoying.
Right. But then it's like, you know, I always tell clients, it's like, it's just going to save you one trip because you still have to go back and dump the water out.
True. Next thing we need is a small sink next to the stove. You just tip it in.
Yes, right.
maybe that's too much.
Right, probably a little too much, but hey, you never know.
So what about with DIY? Do you recommend that?
That's also a tricky question because it depends on your level of experience and the type of home upgrade you're tackling. So if you feel like, you know, I got this, like I am good, I can do this, you know, by all means. But sometimes with DIY projects, people who are handy and experienced, it can turn out well. But sometimes you can DIY something and make mistakes or maybe not know everything about the process that an expert would otherwise know. And then what ends up happening is you're trying to save money, but then you have to hire someone to fix a bad job that you did. So it could backfire. Being that I'm a designer, I always recommend hiring professionals for jobs. If you know, I'm also kind of picky, you know, like even with paint, like I want a really clean paint job, like my baseboards, my trims, all of that, you know. So it just depends on like what you can tackle and what you feel comfortable with, what's safe. Like, are you, you know, to tackle on your own, and when you really do need to call in a professional.
So in what situation do you definitely need to call in a professional?
So I'd probably say like electrical work, you know, that for sure. Maybe like if you just want to caulk your bathtub, like, okay, you don't have to call a professional. And then it also depends, like tile work as well. I've known homeowners that can DIY this, but I've also seen really bad tile DIY jobs. I had a client who ended up hiring someone because they tried to do it themselves. And with tile work, especially in showers, you know, you want crisp edges, you want their clean lines, and there's different types of trim you can use. There's Schluter, like metal trim, there's bullnose, there's pencil tile. And so there was really no trim on this tile work. So that's just one example.
I had no ideas. Yeah, sorry.
Oh no, I was just saying it just depends what the project is and what you're experienced in.
Yeah, I had no idea there were so many different ways to trim a tile.
Oh yes, for sure. And it really can differentiate between a beautiful tile job and a bad job. So,
and that's why you get a professional in, because they know.
Yes, exactly. So it's just like one example, but and also insulation. That's a big one that can go south very easily. Probably best to hire someone to do your insulation.
Yes, I think that one's very important as well. I think also maybe plumbing. Oh yeah, you said that one.
Yes, that too. Unless it's just like changing a faucet or something, but yeah.
So do you have any recommendations, like strategies for anyone who wants to start or who's planning to remodel their home?
Yes, I would say number one, stay organized. And when I say organized, I mean have a paper folder, because you're going to be getting a lot of papers, quotes, whatever it may be. And then keep a digital folder of your receipts, your quotes, anything contractors, any electricians, anyone sends over to you. And then the third folder you should have is an email folder. You're going to be getting emails. So it's really important in any renovation or remodeling job. You want to have things written down. Any verbal promises, any verbal guarantees are really not guarantees. It's really best to have things in writing whenever possible and save everything. And, I had an experience once where a countertop color was specified, and this company went back to the original specification, not the updated specification, and ordered the original one. So, we were able to pull up that email and say, hey, we had on this date, we had emailed you that the specification had changed, and so it can save you from misunderstandings. It can also save your wallet if there's a mistake that's happened and it's not on your end. That's probably the biggest number one for me, staying organized in your communication and all the information you get, because there's a lot of moving parts. And then number two, I would say, I know we talked about this already, but like really vetting who you work with. Don't just go with the low bidder. Try to find someone who is going to do good quality work for your home. And then three, I would say, trying to think. I think those are the two big ones that I can think of now. What was your question one more time?
That's okay. I guess, what are the first steps for people who are wanting to remodel their homes?
Getting your budget down packed, number one. Knowing, again, realistically what you can spend, and then having that additional budget. But also thinking about if you are on a budget, if realistically, if there are some things you can do, great. And I'm not just saying this because I'm a designer. I'm a huge advocate of hiring a designer, because there's so many details that go into remodeling and renovation projects. Like we talked about, how to trim tile, how to make sure your pot filler is at the right height above your stove, how to pick the right paint color, things like that. There's a bunch of things. So having someone to really guide you through the process, because I do think that can be a misconception going in, that thinking, I have a general contractor, I have an electrician, they're going to tell me exactly what I need to do, and they're going to provide all this direction, because sometimes that's not the case, or you do need to do your own research. And especially when it comes to design decisions, your general contractor's not a designer. They're just there to do the work. As far as picking up the colors or the type of tile you put on your backsplash, these are decisions you need to know and understand,
So when you're picking a budget, where should you look, I guess, to find out what's realistic and what's not?
Fixer is a great resource, fixer.com, and just honestly Googling it. I know I'm using the term Googling, but just doing your research, what does a typical bathroom renovation cost? Keep in mind, there's a lot of factors, if you're using marble versus porcelain, there's a huge change in your budget. Are you installing hardwoods? Are you installing vinyl for the flooring of your home? So I think having a general idea of the material cost of which types of material you're using, if you're on a budget, researching budget friendlier materials. So I always give this example. If you love marble, they now make porcelain tiles that look just like marble. And, it would, instead of spending maybe $25 a square foot, you'll be spending maybe $5 a square foot or less. So definitely doing that research online, looking up what's, not just for materials, but for labor too, what's in your local area. Part of that research also means calling more, don't just get one quote, right? Get at least 2-3 quotes, because I guarantee it, there might be someone who's either overcharging you, or they're just at a certain caliber of their professional career where, they can charge that much, and it's up to you whether you want maybe to hire someone at that level or not. So, that's also really important.
And how much of your budget should go towards like a designer?
That's tricky, because we all, I love our industry and I'm such a huge advocate of it, but we all charge differently. There's a lot that goes into it. Some designers will charge based on the size of the room. So what's square footage? So they'll have like a standard rate. They might charge you a flat fee per room. They might charge you hourly. And it also depends. It depends on the level of work you want from your designer. Some clients come to me and they're like, hey, I just need a little bit of help, like in these areas. I don't need like a full design. And so that's going to change your costs too. So thinking about A, what you need from a designer, B, what level of designer you'd like to hire, because there's some designers that are luxury firms, while there's other designers that cater to more budget-friendly customers. So finding the right fit is also important, I would say.
And you mentioned as well, finding some, I guess, budget alternatives as far as materials. What are some other suggestions that you have?
So probably the biggest for bathrooms, I would say, definitely, I see marble so much and it is beautiful, but if it's not in the budget, please don't feel like your bathroom's going to be any less beautiful. In fact, with marble, it needs to be sealed. It's a natural material, naturally occurring material. So it is porous. Porcelain, on the other hand, ceramic, two amazing choices, alternatives. When it comes to flooring, I know we talked about that. Hardwood is really, one of the best things that you can do for resale value. It's timeless. It's a beautiful choice, but it can be more upkeep, and a good alternative might be like laminate or vinyl flooring. I'm not a big fan of doing tile in like main living areas, but I know some countries like in India or some tropical areas, tile in the main spaces, is considered the way to go. Other materials I can think of, I know we talked about the Schluter trim, which is a metal trim. Sometimes that can be a little bit better on your budget than getting individual pencils. Those are the only three that really come to mind for me right now.
What about like reusing materials? I guess, or finding secondhand, I guess maybe off marketplace, or just, other secondhand shops?
Yeah, I think you definitely could. I'll be honest, I'm not, first I want to say, I think that's very sustainable. I think that's a great sustainable way to do things. For me personally, I don't love to buy secondhand items, and so it might be a personal choice. Like if that's something that you love, like, and you're okay with, amazing. There's also none of really my clients that I've personally worked with, we usually do buy for retail. Whether that means like maybe we'll go to Home Depot versus like a designer brand to order a vanity light for your bathroom. But I unfortunately just don't have a lot of experience in using secondhand or finding or sourcing products for remodels specifically, from those kinds of sources.
Yeah.
So
I guess it's a little bit harder because you have to do a bit more research as far as finding the places, and then I guess you don't get as much choice as well.
right, that could definitely limit your options, and what you're looking for as well. Like maybe things like furniture, of course, that's a standard. I wouldn't know as far as like appliances and things like that, like how trustworthy that would be if you're getting, maybe you're getting a good bargain, but like, is the quality okay? I would wonder.
Possibly not related to remodeling, but I don't trust soft fabric, anything soft, like couches and stuff that are secondhand. I don't know. I just don't trust them.
Oh, see, I'm like you too. Like fabrics, especially, just I don't know. They give me the heebie-jeebies. I don't know what happened there.
Yeah. Why don't you want this sofa?
Yeah, so that's a tricky one.
Is setting a timeline important?
Oh yeah, for sure. Hands down, I think this is another challenge. I think people come in and think, okay, this is going to be a quick process, but there's so much that could happen. Even with painting cabinets, the coats in between need to dry, so that can add a day each time. So that is probably another huge thing I encourage homeowners to do is you need to communicate with your tradespeople. So even if you're just getting like your kitchen cabinets painted, you really need to ask 3 questions. What do I need to do to prep for this project, if anything? B, how are you prepping for this project? Because living in a construction zone is tough. There's going to be a lot of dust. I've had some tradespeople who don't prep the area as well. I had a client who had hardwood floors. Countertop person came in, fabricator, didn't put anything on the floors, ripping out the old countertops. So all of that material is falling on the floor. And then, goodness, I lost my train of thought, but I had a good one. Just that communication, I think, is really important with your tradespeople. And there's just one more thing, and I can't think of it now, but
that's okay. Do you want to have a think for a second?
What was the question again? Walk me through that. Maybe that will ring a bell, because
timelines.
Oh yes, that was it. So I was going to say, that's the third most important thing. Ask your tradesperson, how long is this going to take? And so that you can prepare. So for example, if you're having a kitchen renovation and you're living with that side by side, you're still in the home and your kitchen's being renovated. If someone tells you 3 days and then it ends up being 10, 11 days, you can prepare. You can set up a temporary space or a kitchen while that's happening. But that's huge. Like, how are you prepping? What do I need to prep, if anything? Another example, like with kitchens, clearing out your drawers before your countertops are installed. Because, all that debris and dust is going to get in there. So asking those questions and then making sure, how long it's expected, and you can't hold your person to that, because delays can happen. So setting yourself up for understanding, like, hey, even though they said 3 days, like, it might take longer. And then lastly, planning ahead. So understanding, and again, this is so broad because there's so every remodeling or renovation project requires a different timeline. So knowing, like, what am I doing, how long it's going to take, shipping, picking and shipping items as well can be a huge thing. Probably if someone is on a time crunch, the best way to do it is to source locally and to source from in-stock brands versus like a designer brand with greater lead times,
That makes sense. So you mentioned that people, people are living in the spaces as they're being remodeled. Is that common? Is that what most people do?
So far, in my experience, and I'm trying to think out of all the renovation projects I've done so far, yes, mostly everyone was living. I had a recent client who hadn't moved in yet and wanted to, we developed a beautiful color palette. It was like an 8,500 square foot house for paint colors, and they hadn't moved in yet. So they had an apartment that they were shifting from. So they were able to live in their residence and then wait until all that was done and then move in. And honestly, that's the best thing. But I understand that's usually a lot of times, at least in my experience, it's not always the case. Usually you have to, you've moved in, you're situated, and maybe you're thinking of this renovation or remodel project down the road. And so you have no choice but to stay in that space. I can't say for sure how other people deal with it. I know with me and my clients, everyone has stayed home. If possible, I mean, if you have the choice, do things before you move in. And, if you have another residence you can temporarily stay at, if it's a huge remodel, it's probably going to be in your best interest, because a lot of dust, a lot of chemicals, smells, especially with hardwood restaining. Oh my goodness, terrible.
I've lived in, semi-construction sites. Well, not semi.
How did it go for you?
I was a kid, so, I was just like, oh, mom and dad, why are they doing this to us?
Exactly.
But, I think it's pretty common. I mean, at least as far as my experience as well. I guess also, how often do people do the whole house versus just one or two rooms? And I guess what is in your experience the better option?
Yeah, that's a good question. I will say that in my level of experience as a designer, I've been a designer for 5 years, entering year 3 in my business. I don't feel like I've been in this industry long enough to really answer that question well, but oh my goodness, for some reason I just completely forgot what you just said. I don't know why that happened.
So I'm just asking, when, remodeling the whole house versus maybe room by room?
Oh, yes. I'm so sorry. I don't know why. I just blanked out there.
That's okay.
Yeah. So in my experience so far, it's always been sections. It's never, and a lot of times it'll be like the first floor or like maybe the kitchen or the master bathroom or a section, and people will do it in phases. But I also, again, I'm not a luxury design firm. For me, it's just me. I'm a solo designer. So I'm a smaller business owner. The projects that I've been involved in have been in phases or pieces, except for one of my clients who did that whole basement. But again, that was just the basement versus the whole house. So I would say the whole house is less common than just doing segments. And the segments are usually for 2 reasons, right? Budget and livability as well.
I guess bedrooms don't need quite as much amenities as like your kitchen or your bathroom.
Yeah, those are the 2 biggest ones. I've done like decorating projects with bedrooms, but not any full renovations. Trying to think. Mostly it's kitchen and baths.
Yeah, I guess because we use them the most. I mean, I'm asleep most of the time in my bedroom, so I don't need to know what it looks like.
And have you thought about like how your kitchen and your bathroom work for you? Are you happy with those spaces?
No.
Tell me why.
Oh, I'm renting for one thing.
Okay.
So I don't really get to choose the layout of either of them. And they've gone the cheapest route possible with everything.
Oh my God.
Probably my biggest annoyance in the bathroom. Okay, 2 biggest annoyances. There's a space between the bath and the sink where the shower curtain goes, but water gets in between there and it's just wet constantly.
Oh gosh.
And then the other one is because it's an old apartment, the what's it called? The washing machine doesn't have a place for the hose to go. So I have a hose that is separate that I put into the sink every time we want to use the washing machine.
Oh, so that can be frustrating, I'm sure.
But, you know, as a renter, these are things I can't really change at all. So, I mean, do you have any tips for renters? Probably remodeling is far out of what renters can do.
Yeah, that's a tough one because it's always good to check with your landlord. I've worked with a lot of renters and usually they are just decorating projects. But, you know, there's some cool ways that you can update your space. There's like peel and stick backsplashes now. You can find them everywhere. There's peel and stick wallpaper. There's peel and stick tiles. Whether that's like a tile designed to look like a porcelain or ceramic tile or like a wood tile. So there's a lot of things you can do. They're more of like a patch up, you know, that you can do on top of the existing layout. Decorating, painting, if your landlord allows you to paint. Sometimes I've had clients where their landlord will allow it, but they're just like, hey, just change the color back before you go if they do something super bold. But you know, don't forget about the basics. Sometimes a good paint job, changing your hardware in the kitchen. For you, unfortunately, the laundry room situation, there's nothing much to be done there. But, you know, sometimes it's just little things, you know, that can really make a huge difference.
Yeah, I have considered painting it, you know, asking if I could paint it, but seems like a lot of work.
What color were you thinking about?
Oh, I'd probably go a very similar color, but just get rid of all of the stains that the previous tenants left.
Oh, yeah. See, and even just that, imagine the big impact you could have in your space if you repaint it.
Yeah,
so.
Maybe something a little bit brighter as well. It's sort of that beigey color. Yeah, but I'll do it one day or I'll move.
Yep. Or the peel and stick wallpaper. It just comes right out and it doesn't, you know, destroy your wall behind. So
True. So what are some challenges that people face when they're remodeling?
Probably, I'd probably say again, budget. Budget's a big thing. And then number 2, who to hire, do I need a designer? Who do I need to really complete this full remodel? And it depends on, and also really, I think sometimes figuring out your goals, because I do have clients who come to me and they're like, we want to update the space. We just don't know how. Like, what do we need? Like, what do we actually need to do to make this look better or make it do this or have it serve this function? So sometimes getting clear on why are you renovating? Why are you remodeling can be a challenge. And then, I feel like those are the 3 big ones that come to mind for me right now.
Do you ever have people who, I guess they feel very attached to their home and they don't want to change it, or they have really specific visions on what they want?
I would say usually clients that come to me, they're ready for change. Sometimes there's certain pieces, certain things, like maybe a family heirloom or, a piece of furniture that was passed down through generations that they don't want to let go of. But usually clients who come to designers are ready for change, right? That's kind of why you're hiring us. And I know even from speaking from a designer perspective, those are the clients that we love to work with, because we want to help you. We want you to feel really good in your space and make it work for you. But in order for that to happen, you do need to be receptive to feedback and change.
So what's a practice that you do in your own home to sort of maintain it?
So I am really into sustainability. I try to be very eco-friendly. This has been like a decade-long journey for me. But I recycle and compost every day. It's very, very, very important to me. I always say it's it's better for 10 people to recycle imperfectly than to have one person do it perfectly. And so I sort through my recycling, I compost any leftovers. We've all been there, right? Like we don't finish an apple, it goes bad. And so I donate I work with a compost company here called Secondhand Soil in Macon. They're really wonderful. They pick up my compost, it turns into soil, and then it goes to local farmers, which is really nice. So
yeah, that's lovely. Yeah, I do the
yeah.
same. My council collects all of our green waste. So that's
Oh,
really great.
Is that very typical? Like in Australia, is that like
some other councils actually go as far as they give everyone little buckets, and they say put all of your food waste in there, and they sit in your kitchen. My council isn't quite there yet, but yeah, I think it's, at least in Melbourne, it's pretty common.
Wow, that's amazing. So in the US, it's not, unfortunately. And I'm so happy to hear that. I hope we can learn from that. That's amazing.
It makes it very easy because all I have to do is put it in the bin and I don't have to worry about any of the actual composting.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Same here. The company deals with that. But that's really nice that you also compost. It makes me happy.
So how do you think that, composting and recycling, how do they impact your home?
I feel like, with me, I love home organization. I'm a minimalist. I'm very, very eco-conscious. To me, it's creating this home environment means when things leave it or when things come into it, like I'm being conscious. I use bamboo toothbrushes. It's just for me, I feel like I'm creating a healthy sense of living. Because I know it sounds so cheesy, but like I'm one of those people. Like I love our planet. Like it does so much for us. Like why can't we, if we can support it 10%? Because yeah, we live in this home, this house, but I mean, again, very cheesy, but like Earth is our home, So
the house is one of our homes, but the bigger home is the Earth.
Yeah, it is.
Do you recommend that everyone do this? Everyone composts?
I do. I mean, if you can, and if it's in your budget, try to find a local company if you can't do it in your own yard, and recycle. Please recycle whenever you can. And when possible, try to, again, you don't have to be perfect, but if there's certain things in your daily that you can switch out, like maybe instead of Ziploc bags, plastic Ziploc bags, like there's paper versions, craft paper. I use craft paper for everything. My gifts, client goodie bags, like craft paper is one of the most sustainable materials. So if you have folders that you need for work or school, type in craft binders, craft notebooks, craft pens, and you'll find such a huge assortment. It's very similar in its biodegradable sense that just like a leaf would biodegrade, craft paper biodegrades the very same way. People also don't realize that just because something's biodegradable doesn't necessarily mean it's a good thing, because things can biodegrade and they're microplastics or plastics. So picking things that are compostable, which craft paper is always, it tends usually to be the better route in any material that you use if possible.
That's great. I'm going to get myself some compostable craft paper. And then I'll take everyone's Christmas presents or Christmas present wrapping afterwards and put it in my bin.
I would love that. I would, yeah. If you end up, doing that, please let me know. I'd love to see it because I just love craft paper. Great.
Is there anything that that you wanted to talk about that we've missed?
I can't think of anything. Trying to think. I had a couple of notes written down, so I'm just cruising through those. Oh, I would say, one thing I did miss talking about was, whenever you're planning a renovation or remodeling project, please don't rush through it. You're spending so much money and time and effort, and really sit through and plan. Even if it's just painting your walls, get paint samples, really sit down, get samples of anything that you can. And just try to be very mindful of the process, but also just have fun, and always be willing to, don't ever feel like you're being annoying to a contractor. You're paying them. Like, ask questions, find out as much as you can, because unfortunately, time and time again, unless you're with a designer, I've seen this, unless you're experienced, you're hiring somebody you trust, sometimes they won't provide enough direction. It's your job to find those answers, whether it's, how are you going to prep my floors before removing my old countertop? Or, are there any unexpected costs that are going to come up later? Just asking the right questions.
Yes, I guess I've heard the saying, measure twice, cut once.
Yes, I say that all the time.
Yeah.
Actually, just like you.
Yeah. Take your time with everything and make sure it's done, I guess, right the first time.
100%. I agree.
So we do have some questions from the audience.
Okay.
So the first question is, what are the main hidden causes of extra costs when remodeling?
What are the main hidden, what was that one again?
Causes of extra costs.
That's a tough one, because it depends on what you're doing. What's the project? So one thing I can think of in a bathroom, I went to a recent shooter training, and if there's mold, if your shower system wasn't sealed properly and water has penetrated through the tile, it can create mold and rotting of your structure, right? So one of the questions in this training was, there were 25 general contractors there, and they're like, who here has lifted up a shower and found mold underneath? And 25 of them. So that can, if there's any structural damage caused by improper moisture management in bathrooms, that could be an unexpected. And really, again, it's hard for me to say. It just depends on the project. I've had everything from a defective pot filler that was leaking oil and he had to change it out. The company did reimburse the client. So a lot of things can happen. Maybe you have a defective material, a defective product, and sometimes you need to pay additional labor for certain things. So it can vary.
I guess the most important thing is to be prepared for everything.
Yes, definitely. And I wouldn't, as beautiful and amazing and transformative as a remodeling or renovation project is, it is worth it. It's going to change your life. Depending on what your goals are, why are you doing it? Whether it's for resale value, a utilitarian reason, or just because hey, it's ugly and I want to feel better about with your beige walls. Just getting clear on that. It will change your life for the better, hands down. But know that stress is involved. Know that it's not all butterflies and cupcakes, and you're gonna be stressed. Hands down, there will be times where you're going to be stressed. And so just being prepared for all of that, and ways that you can mitigate that stress is, all the things that we talked about today, just having a plan, having a list, having a high versus low priority list, knowing which things to cut out if you can't do everything you want immediately, hiring good people, vetted people, licensed contractors, all of those good things.
Good advice. What's the smallest budget you've worked with?
For remodeling or renovations, or just design in general?
I think remodeling.
Ooh, that's a tricky one. What's the smallest budget I've worked with? I honestly, without looking at my numbers, I can't say. I really don't remember.
Okay. So our third audience question is, can you recommend a good, durable paint or a solution for laminate furniture?
Ooh, laminate furniture. A good I'm not a DIYer, and I always tell people this. I do not know how to repaint furniture. I did write an article about this, which I'm more than happy to share, but I interviewed an expert. She was we called her the serial furniture flipper. And I think it was like an orange liquid or substance that she put before on the furniture to really, it was like a liquid sander, I think. I'll post that article, but she talks about how to repaint furniture the right way, and prep, from my understanding, is like the most important thing. And I wish I could think of the name. It was like this orange liquid she used.
What we'll do is we'll put a link to that article in the show notes so everyone can find it.
For sure. I will. Yeah, I'll definitely. And she's really sweet. I'll put the article there.
So this is a similar question from the same person, but sort of the same question. Do you have a good paint solution for floor tiles in the kitchen or bathroom?
I've never painted or worked with someone who has painted their floor tiles. But I've seen like YouTube videos on it. And I will say that if you are on a budget, you can find really pretty tiles if you're willing to replace them in ceramic and porcelain options. So if possible, changing out your tile could be just to a more budget-friendly option is probably the way to go. But I feel like that's more of a DIY job, so I don't know much about it.
Okay. So now we're going to do the open mic. And you said you wanted to talk about businesses or your business.
Yeah, I love what I do. I will say that probably one of the things about me is I'm a career changer. I was initially going to go to medical school. So I graduated degree in neuroscience. I did the whole 9 yards, prepared for my MCATs, all of that good stuff. And then worked for a biopharmaceutical company. I was in the medical biopharmaceutical world for about 8 years, 8 to 9 years. And then finally 5 years ago, when I made the decision to go into interior design, I love it, but I was also very naive. The thing is, when you're a designer and you operate and own your own business, designing is such a fraction of that process. More of it is business, like how to be profitable. One thing I'm focusing right now is developing my client experience. So how to, anyone that works with you, I'm sure you've experienced it too. Like, who's someone that you've hired recently?
I don't hire anyone.
For anything at all, or you've gone to a service provider or something?
Very long ago, I did work with some art teachers. So I was organizing them to get them to do classes for me.
Oh, okay. So you hired an art teacher, right? So, and like, are there any parts of that experience you wish could have been better?
I think talking about the money aspect.
Okay.
Yeah. Pardon?
Like more clarity on that?
Yeah, it's just I always find it awkward because they're essentially a contractor for me at that point. And it was always, how much do you expect to get paid? Well, how much money do you have budgeted? Well, this is our budget. And this is my what I expect. And then trying to just that conversation where you're trying to decide how much to pay each other, how much to pay the person and how much they expect. And then,
right.
Yeah.
So just budget wise sounds like.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think it's more of the, I guess the communication in a sense, because trying to figure out what their expectations are and trying to match them with what we have budget wise. And, but also keeping in mind, I don't want to undervalue them.
Right.
Mm.
So it's like a tricky balance, it sounds like, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's like all those little things, even I'm just like you, like sometimes in that client experience, like working with like, how can I be more clear in explain budgets or explain the design process in a more systematic way. So all those things, I love working on my business. It really lights me up. And I think my goal is always I'm always thinking about like, how can I improve my client's experience? You know, from the very start, I've now started to do like little goodie bags where I put like fresh lavender and like candle and like these herbal wipes and like some good stuff in there. And I just like, you know, I feel like just when you're a designer, of course it's a creative, fun job, but it's also very demanding and technical. And like we just talked about, you know, remodeling, renovation can be really stressful. So it's nice to be able to take some of that burden off my client's shoulders, but sometimes it can also be stressful for us as the designers. So
what's the most stressful part, or what's your least favorite part?
My least favorite part is, that's a tough one. I will say, gosh, there's so many parts of it that I love, but the least favorite part is when problems happen. So like just this week I had a client, or last week I had a client's coffee table that delivered damage, and the experience was terrible. The company was supposed to come before Thanksgiving. They didn't. Then they came a day before they promised the delivery, and they just showed up at 9:00 at night and disturbed my clients. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like I like handling those conversations can be tricky because it's like you want to make your client feel better, but also it's like out of your hands, you know. And my computer's about to die. I didn't realize this, but
that's okay. We're actually almost done. So yeah. If people want to find out more about you, where should they go?
So I probably Facebook. I'm the most active on Facebook. You can look me up by my first and last name. I post a lot of my projects, what I'm working on. You can also find me on Instagram under Studio Vyas, and on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn. You can also find me on several publications. So I'm an interior designer writer and home improvement writer for like tons. Like you can find me on Martha Stewart, Better Homes and Gardens, my Domaine, Domino. So feel free to, you know, reach out to me anyway.
Yeah, we'll post we'll post some of those links on our show notes as well. So thanks for coming and talking to me today. It was really great to learn lots about remodeling.
Thank you, Gabrielle. I really appreciate it.
Great, thank you. You've been listening to Room by Room, produced by the Home Organisation Science Labs, a division of LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. More episodes like this from across 10 life management perspectives can be found by searching LMSL on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube, and any other podcasting apps available on your smart devices. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider rating, sharing, and subscribing to our channel, as it helps other people to find it so we can grow and continue to bring you quality resources. More of our work can be found on our website, ho.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Gabriella Joustra, and thanks for tuning in.